Well, buonasera, good evening. Welcome to the second edition this season of Adventures in Italian Opera. We have a wonderful guest tonight, and I bring you greetings from Stefan Albertini. He's been out for a few days. He will be back soon. And so I'm introducing myself. I'm Fred Plotkin. You know me by now. And my guest tonight is Christian Van Horn. That doesn't always happen. A lot of times it's, oh, who's that? But obviously you know that he's a wonderful bass baritone, a New York-born person who now is ruling the world of opera. And we're going to talk about mostly Italian roles, and not only. So Christian, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having
me. When Renata Scotto was here, she pushed away the microphone. She said, I don't need it. And I tried to explain to her it's not about amplification. It's we're doing a broadcast. Right, right. So this is for you at home. Julian, I'm going to ask you to play number 2 for starters.
We have a DJ.
Yeah.
Bravo, signor padrone.
But if you want, you can look
Ora
at yourself.
incomincio a capire il mistero e a veder schietto tutto il vostro progetto.
Oh, that's a young guy.
Yeah. This is,
Non vorrai vero, poi finiscono. Io corriero e la Susanna. Ambasciatrice, non sarà, Figaro il dice. Se pur ballare, signor continuo, se pur ballare, signor continuo, chitarrino le suonerò, chitarrino.
That, of course, is Figaro and Mozart's Le Nozze di Figaro. Where was that production?
That was in Perm, Russia. And if you don't know where that is, It's on the border of Siberia. And the reason we went out there was Sony Classical wanted to make a recording. And there's no unions over there in the orchestras. And so there was a maestro over there named Theodor Korensis who had an orchestra named Musica Eterna, and he wanted to record the Due Ponte operas. So we went out there to Siberia for 7 weeks, and we did a production that you saw when we rolled the production into a studio recording, the last studio recording I ever did.
Really?
Yeah. We don't do studio recordings
No, you don't
anymore.
really. They're mostly recorded now live in
Live,
performances. Although we're going to focus a lot on Verdi tonight for reasons that are evident, I wanted to start with Mozart because a lot of singers do, but also because I saw you do Figaro at the Met. And it was a wonderful cast. I'm just looking. It was Sasha Cook, who's a friend of mine, Federico Lombardi, will be here April 1st on the stage, Ying Fang, and Maurizio Morato, really a great cast up and down.
Jerry Finley.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I jumped you, sorry.
and one of really my very favorite singers and artists is Gerald Finley, who was on the stage a few years ago. And what I wanted to talk to you about, Christian, regarding him, you, and so on, is that we hear the definition baritone, bass-baritone, and bass. And you're defined as a bass baritone. He's defined as a bass baritone. Is that a
Right.
proper definition? And what is it?
I mean, Jerry's voice sits a little higher than mine.
Yeah,
Which is
I know.
probably what you're getting at. But
Yeah.
it's when I was young, I said bass baritone because it encompassed more possibilities. If you said bass when you were young, you were limited to about 3 things. And so I said bass baritone so that I could include the Mozart roles, Figaro, Don Giovanni. It was a means to an end, really. I have baritone notes, I have bass notes,
Right.
so we say bass baritone.
But there are singers, someone like Luca Pisaroni, I think, calls himself a bass,
Yeah.
and has sung Figaro. I've seen
It was written for a bass.
Right, I know, and I've seen baritones kind of do Figaro.
Yeah.
And the Count, and so Thomas Hampson is the Count a lot, and he's a
But
baritone.
you know, Luca Pisaroni has also sung the Count.
I know Luca's sung the Count, and therefore, I guess what I'm getting at is the famous Jessie Norman quote that she said to me, but said to everyone, pigeonholes are for pigeons. And, you know, when they asked her, are you a soprano, are you a contralto, what are you? And she said, I'm a singer, and, you know, I sing this role well, and I'll do that, and that role I won't do. And
It's funny, I don't think singers need the classification, but
Right.
the audience seems to need to, and the composers need that.
and what about casting directors and conductors and stage directors and so on?
We're outside the box more than ever. You know, Jerry Finley also sang Wotan.
Right.
And Hans Sachs.
True,
You know,
true.
there's a lot of if you have the notes, you got the notes.
Yeah. Is it just the notes, or is it also the temperament, the affinity for a character?
Yeah.
Sometimes there's the physical aspect that if you're doing Don Giovanni and Leporello, you want 2 people that are sort of the same height and build because they
Just for one scene, yeah.
for one scene. But sometimes the stage director will have in mind to have all very tall people. I've seen certain ring cycle operas where everyone is very tall.
Well, they make Wagnerians big. That's just by default.
So here's the question: are you going to sing Wagner one day?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I've been offered Wotan in 3 places, and I've turned it down.
How come?
I worked a long time to sing Verdi. I want to stay here for a little while.
Okay.
They don't let you do it when you're young. You have to wait. And so I feel like I'm just finally getting in it.
But actually, I agree with you. But this is a point too, that basses, bass baritones, and sometimes baritones have to wait till later in their careers to do certain roles, either because, but not just Verdi, but Donizetti and Bellini, their fathers, their grandfathers, their priests, their warriors, things like that.
They used to paint the gray in my beard. Now they don't.
So, do you still sing Mozart?
Sure.
I know, I mean, I've heard you as Publio, La Clemenza di Tito. I've heard you as Figaro. What else might I have heard you as Zauberflirt? I've heard as
Yeah.
a speaker.
Did you hear Don Giovanni?
No. Was it here?
No, we did a production in Paris 2 years ago and did a production in Vienna last year.
No,
I have two more. I'll be an old Don Giovanni, but why not?
I've not lately been in Paris and Vienna. But, no, do you have any coming here? Maybe you're not allowed to announce, but
I have some in Chicago.
some in
Yeah.
Chicago, okay. That would certainly be worth traveling for. I would rather go to Paris or Vienna, but
Yeah, yeah,
Chicago's
yeah,
great too. But how do you approach that role, which to me, it's an opera I've directed, I've worked on it endlessly. To me, the hardest operas to direct are Le Nozze di Figaro and Don Giovanni by Mozart and Da Ponte. Because if you change one artist, everything, the whole balance changes. And sometimes with casting, you can cast someone and then they can't perform, and it changes everything.
Right.
Have you been yet in an ideal Don Giovanni or Nozze di Figaro production in terms of how the chemistry works?
Oh, never. No,
Never,
no,
I
no,
know.
no, that doesn't happen.
So,
You get elements, two or three.
Right.
If you get the right combinations, as long as we tell the story, that's what we're here to do.
Right.
A perfect ensemble is few and far between.
so, a number of years ago, I worked on a Don Giovanni production that many of you saw, and the issue that we had in the rehearsal room was the following. We knew who the Don was, obviously. We knew who Leporello was. But a lot of times the question that's asked is the leading woman Donna Anna or Donna Elvira? And depending on what either the conductor or the stage director or the diva or sometimes the Don Giovanni decides, everything changes.
I think Mozart decided he wanted Donna Anna.
He wanted Donna Anna, why?
He gave her the better music.
Except that, I know what you're saying, except that every soprano I've ever spoken to said she prefers singing Don Elvira.
Is that right?
Every.
Elvira is the only one who got to the Don.
Right.
That's the only one that really affected him and changed the whole course of everything, because I think for a brief moment, something creeped into his black hole of a heart and
Yeah.
made him like her.
When she comes back at the end to save him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
But the thing is that I know what you're saying about Anna, and frankly, in the production that I'm referring to,
it's usually the diva,
Anna was the diva.
for sure.
Yeah. But I've worked on productions where people like Kiri Takanoa, Carol Vaness, Barbara Frietuli were singing Elvira, and they became the focus.
Yeah.
And this is what's so fascinating and prismatic about the opera Don Giovanni, that it's never the same twice. Even with the same cast and the same production, it's never the same twice from one night to the next. I can't think of any opera that's so completely that way.
I agree.
And talk about some of the Annas and Elviras that you've sung with and how musically, how it worked out as a relationship.
The last time I did it, Federica Lombardi was Elvira.
Okay.
But Federica was a famous Anna.
Yeah.
And she was sort of taking a step backwards. And Slavka, Slavka, her last name is escaping me. She was the Anna. Lombardi as Elvira elevated, because I
Yeah.
think she had done both roles.
Right.
And so she knew how to make it her story.
Yeah.
And I prefer Elvira as the Don simply because that's, I think, his love interest, honestly. If you think anybody gets to the Don, it's her.
There is Elvira's maid. There is Leporello, in effect, being dumped on Elvira.
But that's just another pretty face up in the window, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's always, poor Elvira is like comic relief. And the opera was premiered in Prague, but then was done in Vienna, and they added more music for the Elvira in Vienna. And with the result that it became a more important role. But she was sort of the punching bag, the comic relief. Whereas Anna, as you said, was the one that Mozart saw as the diva. So I just wanted to mention Mozart and Don Giovanni and Le Nozze di Figaro, because that's a big part of what you do. But what I want to focus on primarily tonight is, in doing research for this, I've discovered, obviously you've sung a lot of Verdi, you've sung a lot of early Verdi.
Yeah.
And that, I didn't quite expect that,
Why?
because I didn't know people were doing so much early Verdi.
Oh, I see, as repertoire choice.
Yeah, not because of you.
No, but it makes sense for me.
Yeah, but the thing is that, we tend to think of,
Later Verdi, he wrote for low basses.
Right.
And early on, it was more bass-baritone.
right. But I noticed that you did a lot of these in Chicago, but that it's not necessarily that companies are doing Attila every day or Ernani every day.
No, you're right.
And Macbeth a little more. But, if I would ask all of you to name 5 Verdi operas, you may name Nabucco because you know of it. But the other early Verdis tend not to be mentioned, not because they're not great. They're
They're
wonderful.
clunky stories.
They're clunky stories. In my view, Verdi evolved. But you know what we're going to do? Julian, would you play number 6 from Ernani, which was his 5th opera, Verdi's 5th opera, and then we'll talk about it.
Infelice et tu credevi si bel Dio immacolato del tuo crine tra le nevi io ma invece il disonor. Ah, perché l'età d'inseno dov'incore m'ha serbato ipotevan gli anni almeno particello ancora il cor particello ancora il cor particello ancora il cor doveva gli anni almeno particello ancora il cor ancora il cor onor signori, inoltre non andrà. Scudieri, nozza me, e la sana amica, l'antica sino a quante ne andrà.
Getting serious.
That was all
a
the
hard
video.
stop.
Hard stop. So Ernani, for those of you who don't know it, was written in 1844 by Verdi, and it was originally the property, let's call it, was possessed by Donizetti, who was going to write it, and then thought, Verdi would do well with this particular opera, the story, because Verdi before that had done mostly big picture operas like Nabucco and I Lombardi, in which peoples were struggling and there were choruses and dramas and huge emotion, but he had not yet done something more intimate, basically the story of four people and their interactions and their disagreements and the stories that each one of them had and the compacts, the arrangements that they would have made privately. And it's three men and one woman, and there's a tenor, a soprano, a baritone, and a bass. And they all want the woman in one form or another. She wants the tenor, he's the outlaw. It's based on a play or a story, I forget, by Victor Hugo. And Verdi really took to this because he, for the first time, dealt with domestic drama. He dealt with telling the story of people rather than the people, as in Nabucco. And I see this opera as the template for so much that followed, whether it's Ballo and Moscato, whether it's Simone Boccanegra, it's all these operas that may have big choruses, but it's basically the story of people and how they relate. And even though this is set in Spain, it's a very Italian story, the way the values of the people connect and their misunderstandings or disagreements. And he created a fabulous trio at the end.
All the best.
Do you like singing that trio?
Of course. Well, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing.
Talk about that trio. It's soprano, tenor, and bass.
It's at the end of a very long night.
Yeah.
And there's a cut you can do, and most people won't because it's sacrilege. What's to say about it, One's dying, one's lamenting, one's happy about it,
And amazing music.
Wow, it's incredible music.
To me,
for it.
it's sort of a breakthrough for Verdi.
Was the next step, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because at the end of the opera, the baritone is gone. He could have done a quartet. He later did that in Rigoletto, of course. But he decided in his mind that not only the story, but the vocal categories that would work best in the way he wanted to tell the story was a rather unusual combination of tenor, soprano, and bass.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard this music and learned this music was way back in 1981, and Luciano Pavarotti and Joan Sutherland were singing the two leads in a concert version, and they didn't have a bass. There were basses around, they didn't have a bass, and Marilyn Horne was around rehearsing, and she said, "I'll do it." So the famous Ecco la tazza, she sang.
I heard that story.
And it was remarkable. But the thing is that, to me, and I'm not a singer, this is the first great singable music in Verdi, is this opera,
Interesting, yeah.
not what came before. And therefore, when we talk about his important works, it was only the fifth of his 28 operas. This is the one we need to look at to understand Traviata, Ballo and Moscato,
The middle years.
all the middle years, Rigoletto, absolutely. And so talk, if you would, about this production, because I didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
And I want to know your experience of the role of Silva, is the name of the character.
Silva was a barn burner. I mean, they never named these things correctly. If you wanted to go by the size of the role, you would give it to Silva for sure.
You call the opera Silva.
You would call the
Yeah.
opera Silva
Yeah.
if the title character is the one who sings the most. I remember being on stage all night. There was no break. And you saw that costume, that was like real fur. It was like, it's a hot night for sure.
Well, you were in Chicago.
Yeah, you're right. But it was duet, 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 ensemble. It was, I remember it being endless.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not complaining.
No, I know, but so when you're presented with a role like that you learn and it's endless, how do you as a singer decide the pacing,
Yeah.
the energy conservation.
It's a great question.
And the fact that you're wearing a hot costume under hot lights.
So the first thing that I do in the show is what you just saw, the aria and cappelletta, which is a heavy sing. That's the first entrance that he makes, and then he effectively doesn't leave the stage again. And so you can't pace. You have to sing this beautiful aria. There's no place to hide. You have to go. And so where I pace is anytime the chorus is singing. If the chorus is singing, it looks like I'm singing, but I'm not, because there's 12 guys behind me who are doing all the same notes. And so I'll let the chorus do some heavy lifting, and a lot of us are doing this, where we pace out if the chorus is doubling you at all.
Yeah.
That's a great way to save some. I have a certain number of notes in a day, and when they're gone, they're gone. We can replenish them tomorrow, but there's no more today, and so it's a personal thing. Everybody runs out of gas at some point. It's knowing how to pace that out.
Do you think that Verdi learned as he went along how to better structure roles so that the singers would have downtime?
Well,
Or not.
A living composer has the singers every day, and so
Yeah.
he can find out just exactly what they're capable of, and he had some of the most capable.
Right.
But not impossible. We can still do this stuff. It's not impossible work. Or if you look at Les Troyens of
Yeah.
Berlioz or something, where it's almost written for somebody that doesn't really exist. Verdi knew.
You mean the
voices.
tenor role?
The tenor role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aeneas, yeah, Aeneas. But that's sometimes my favorite opera.
Yeah.
And you sang in it, I know.
But not in A.
Not Aeneas, no. But Julian, play number 7, because we're going to stick in early Verdi, Attila.
There you go.
Because Ernani was 1844, Attila 1846. And we're going to talk about what happened in 2 years.
mondo fra i monti montagna.
Now, this must have been at a time when the pandemic was on.
That was the first thing I did coming out of the pandemic.
Wow.
So that was 10 months of vocal rest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Attila the Hun, is, to me, and I'll get into this after, we talk about Nabucco and I Lombardi as Verdi's great nationalistic operas. This is the one that even more than those inflamed the public. This one inflamed the Venetians for a reason we'll get into. Talk about this character, who is the lead character. He's not necessarily a good guy, but he's a complex guy. He's not just a villain.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. It would be easy to play him like a cartoon.
Right.
I think, and not that the music lends itself to that, but certainly the characterization could easily have been very one-dimensional.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Scarpia and Tosca a little bit. If it's played right, there is a tiny bit of a black hole-shaped heart, you know? I think it has a little tinge of that to it. So even if it's not there as the singer, if I believe there is, it becomes twice as interesting to portray it.
Because if you're the title character, if you're just a bad guy from the beginning,
Nowhere
there's
to
no place
go.
to grow. Yes, exactly. The story of this opera has a wonderful background that's not very often told. I was a Venetian history major in college because Venice was not the birthplace of opera, but the first place where opera really took root and grew. And so I came to learn a lot about Attila, the opera, because Venice, unlike most Italian cities, was not of Roman origin. It was a newer city. The old city was Aquileia, which was further east near Trieste. And when Attila the Hun attacked Aquileia and destroyed Aquileia, the people of Aquileia moved to 118 inhospitable islands in the northern part of the Venetian lagoon, and it rose come fenice, like a phoenix, from the ashes of Aquileia. And they built Venice, the people of Aquileia built Venice. They brought their glass-making skills, they brought their knowledge of wine and vinification, and therefore alcohol, and therefore perfume. A lot of the original industries of what we now think of as Venice were born from the people of Aquileia. And the reason that this had relevance in 1846 is that Venice was under Austria. And if you've been to Venice, you know that there is a railway bridge that connects the mainland of the Veneto with the old city of Venice. The Austrians built that bridge in 1846. And this opera was Verdi's response to the Huns, the Undi, the barbaric people of the north coming in and destroying Venice, in his view. And therefore, the Venetians had to rise up again the way they rose up, or they were reborn after the attacks of Attila the Hun. And when I go, if I'm going to have a tombstone, on my tombstone will be a line from this opera. Avrai tu l'universo, resti l'Italia me. In other words, you can keep the universe, but let Italy be mine. And it's said as the battle cry against Attila, and it's a great opera. And what's her name? Not Odabella, is that her name?
Yeah.
The female character is a powerful woman, and the women of Aquileia, Verdi was attuned to this, were different from the women elsewhere on the Italian peninsula because they were allowed roles in government, in education, in building the phoenix of helping Venice rise. So Odabella represented that strong temperament, that ability to roll up your sleeves and do what had to be done. And so when this opera premiered at La Fenice, the audience went wild because they recognized in the characters what Verdi was telling them about that horrible railway bridge that had just been built. And this was his way of telling the Venetians, you have to join the Milanese, the people of Torino, of Genova, of other cities in the battle to throw out the foreigners, in this case the Austrians. But most of northern Italy was occupied by Austria, but parts by France, part by other places. But have you sung the whole role?
No, I will this year
Where?
in Madrid.
Madrid. So I'm going to Paris, I'm going to Chicago, I'm going to Vienna, I'm going to Madrid.
And we're working on one here.
Good.
Yeah, it's not, you know,
Okay.
it's not an ink, but we're talking about
It's not a thing. So I cannot ask you, I'll just wonder whether it's the production that already existed at the Met, you don't have to answer, or a new one. Because
I'll tell you after.
Okay, because that production was conducted by Riccardo Muti, and I figured it was Prada or Fendi or one of the Italian fashion houses did the costumes, and they were not very attuned to what singers need on the stage, let's put it that way. So it was a
Loose fitting.
yeah, loose fitting. I want to go back, Julian, if we could, to number 3, which is not Verdi. It is very late Vincenzo Bellini. He died at 34 or 35. And just because I love the music, and also because I think it points toward what Verdi did. So, Julian, if you would, number 3. So you were having a good night.
Well, that's one of my closest friends there.
Quinn is a wonderful guy. He's been in that seat. Marco Armigliato's been in that seat.
Yeah.
Marco, also a wonderful guy. Quinn he's doing a beautiful Rigoletto right now at the Met
Beautiful.
with Nadine Sierra. So you want to go to Le Contes d'Hoffman. We'll get to that in a bit. Even this Saturday, there's a Met HD. I wanted to bring up a couple of things before. Number one, Christian Van Horn is here tonight, courtesy of the Metropolitan Opera, and I thank them. Number two, you won the Richard Tucker Foundation Prize in 2018, and that's what this is from. The next Richard Tucker event is actually in Carnegie Hall on October 27th, and I encourage you to go. And what was that like it's kind of like, in a way, like the Oscar of American opera singing, but there's only one, there's not all these different categories. And when the singer is notified he or she is at the beginning of the career, well along in the career, but clearly marked out as someone of great distinction. Talk about when you got the call, I guess, from Barry Tucker.
I was in Toronto at the time doing Anna Bolena with Sandra Radvanovsky. And Corrado Rovares was conducting. And Barry called me. You know Barry Tucker? Does everyone know Barry Tucker?
Richard Tucker's, one
Richard
of his
Tucker's
three
son.
sons.
He runs the foundation.
Yeah.
And I had been singing for Barry in his concerts for years. You know, Barry loved free labor, and he would he would call and you know, he could treat you well. But I think one time he paid me with a case of wine in the back of my car. It was that kind of deal. And so he called me, and I just thought it was another time where he was going to need me to sing in the concert, like one of those. I've done a lot of them. And he said, "We need you to be in the show this year." And I said, "Okay, Barry, you know, I'll be there." He says, "We want you to be there because we want you to be our winner." And if for an American opera singer, there was nothing. That was it. And I watched it when I was in school.
Yeah.
And was inspired. And I saw Sam Raimi and Jim Morris sing that exact duet. And so that's what I said. When they said, "What do you want to sing?" I said, "I want to sing Suoni la Tromba with my baritone, Quinn Kelsey."
Yeah.
They said, "You got it."
So I've never asked someone about this who's been I've had many of the recipients here, but what is the buildup like once you have been selected in terms of who they build around you? Because it's like a coming out party. That,
Good way to put it.
you know, all the other great singers are there for you.
Yeah.
It's really a celebration of one artist, but it just happens to be a night full of great singers. And how did they build the program around you? Did they say to you, what would you like to sing? Who would you like to sing with? How did that develop?
Yeah, for sure they said, you know, pick 2 arias that you want, no problem. Give us 3 duets to pick from and tell us what's your order of importance. And I got exactly what I asked for. But Fred is right in that it was just home run hitter after home run hitter that night. And even Anna Netrebko sang that night.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of pressure built into I've won this award and have to prove that I was deserving of it, but then they surround you by the best of the best, and you go, okay. I was also starring in Mephistopheles at the Met in the same week, and so there was a lot of pressure. I stole those shoes from that, by the way, but there's a lot of pressure built into that week. Some hair still hasn't grown back.
I thought you were going to tell me you were in The Wizard of Oz.
That's it. Yeah.
No, it was I was there. It was a wonderful, wonderful night. And there's nothing like this else in America, the Richard Tucker annual concert. And I'm not here to advertise for them, but Barry Tucker's been on the stage. It's just a very special experience, and it's this year, October 27th in Carnegie Hall. Suoni la Tromba concludes the second act, if I recall, of Bellini's I Puritani.
If you say so.
If I say so, I might be right. But it's a real show-stopping duet. Often in productions, they bring down the curtain, and the 2 men stand in front of the curtain. so their sound is completely projected out into the audience, and it's absolutely thrilling. I think that Verdi obviously knew this music, and it influenced a lot of the way he did male duets.
Absolutely.
Even if
Hear
it's
Don
not
Carlo in there.
Don Carlo, even Otello, even though that's a tenor and a baritone, there's no bass there, but almost the rivalry
Yeah.
between the two men as they sing, even if what they're singing they agree about or don't agree about. But I think I always teach this particular duet as sort of foundational when we try to understand Giuseppe Verdi. And that's why I went back to it after having played a couple of other things that we heard. You want to do number 5 or number 8?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
5.
Okay. Julian, would you please play number 5? Then we'll do number 8.
Oh, fair enough.
And now, please welcome the 2018 Richard Tucker Award winner, Christian Van Horn, a wonderful bass baritone who will represent the foundation superbly. Have a great night. Enjoy. See you all next year. Thank you.
Talk about that character, that aria that you picked.
That's at the end of Nabucco.
Yeah.
And it follows the Va Pensiero, which is a tough number to follow. But anytime you get the chorus, you know, when you do the Tucker Gala, they always have the chorus available to you, and almost nobody uses it, and I think you're insane.
Yeah.
Let's have somebody else do some heavy
Lifting.
lifting. And so I always pick pieces that feature the chorus, and so I went ahead and used that one just to have that support underneath me, because as you can see, I was mostly terrified. You know, you're just sort of like focused straight and trying to ignore the 3,000 people in Carnegie.
Because that was your first number.
That was the first thing I did, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I stepped out and did that,
As the
yeah. And
the
it sounded
newly
too low.
crowned-
It's not too low, but when you're nervous, your voice comes up a little bit.
This character, Zachariah, is the leader of what were called the Hebrews, the Jews, who, and by the way, happy Rosh Hashanah. These were the oppressed people, and these were the ones who were the stand-in for the Italians, and therefore Zachariah, to me, is the voice of Verdi in this opera. And I find that very important, because there are other wonderful characters, and some not so wonderful. Some of them have delusions of grandeur. You will never need another election after this one, because I'm in charge, says Nabucco in effect, and Abigail has other opinions, but you guys are the ones who hold forth. I want to mention something I never noticed before. I've heard this aria many times, that the oboe music is almost the same music as he used before Zerilli-Marimò and Don Carlo.
Yes, absolutely.
And I never noticed. Did you know that?
Sure,
I
yeah.
never knew that.
It's very similar.
And I never heard it. I don't know why, but this is why the more
They
we
were
listen.
stealing from each other constantly.
But he was stealing from himself.
Yeah, well, but they did that too.
Rossini
Yeah,
did that, yeah.
endlessly, yeah.
And now number 8. I want to point something out to you, that we have Nabucco 1842, Ernani 1844, Attila 1846, and now Macbeth, the first version, 1847. Verdi did these works in 5 years, and this is so-called early Verdi. And things like Luisa Miller, Rigoletto, Traviata, Trovatore, Don Carlo, Ballo, Otello, Aida, Falstaff were far in the future. And I think even had he just done these, he'd be known as a major composer. But some people, not me, dismiss early Verdi as sort of rough and crude, because look what he went on to do.
No, he had to go through that, didn't he?
Right, but the more that I hear early Verdi, the more I'm really, it's kind of like looking at an early Michelangelo drawing. Yes, he hadn't done the Sistine Chapel yet, but it's an amazing drawing.
That's right.
You know, he did the Pietà, the Vatican Pietà, when he was in his 20s, Michelangelo. So I love watching the lives of long-living artists such as Verdi and Michelangelo, what they go on to do and what they foreshadow and what we forget when we dismiss the early works. Talk about Banquo,
Yeah, well,
He's
we say Banco, right?
Banco,
Italian,
yeah.
right.
but he's from Shakespeare, Banquo. Musically, talk about him.
A fantastic early bass roll. You come in, a duettino, and then the aria we're about to see, which ends in his death. And in this video, as I see here, it's got a great fight sequence at the end. Wait till the end; it's real good.
Yep.
You come in, a couple of duets, big aria, and you die, and you're done. You come back as a ghost later on, but it's a non-singing part. And so it's great to get your feet wet in the Verdi repertoire. So when you see this aria here, you'll know that this is 60% of the role. But it takes a real singer, and you can throw a young singer at it without causing too much disruption to the cast. So I've done this one since I was 30, which is doesn't sound very young, but it's young for a Verdi bass.
It is. And you made me think about something else. There's a tenor role at the end of the opera, Macbeth, who basically has nothing to do until the end. But it's such a great aria with chorus that I hadn't thought about this. Verdi had the central characters of Mr. and Mrs. Macbeth, the only happy couple in Shakespeare. And but he had these other characters who he created great roles for, that, as you said, can be the beginnings of a career.
Oh, for
I hadn't
sure.
thought of that, but both of those roles. So,
Absolutely.
Julian, that's number 8. Per favore.
That's the end of Macbeth, of Banquo there.
Yep.
We spent more time trying to figure out how to fall in the hole than anything else.
At the Met, in a production that I worked on, it was known as Bedtime for Banquo. Seriously.
But still has to wait 2 hours to bow.
It's true. All right, talk about that. How about roles? I went to the Tales of Hoffman last night, which I want you to see, and some of the characters appear at the beginning of the opera, and then they're just around.
Yeah.
Or sometimes there are characters like the Marshal and the Rosenkavalier, who she's on in Act 1, and then there's all that stuff in Act 2, and then she comes on at the end. And women I know who sung the Marshal basically bring their knitting, their children's homework, the kids who come in and they would sit in the dressing room and do that.
Could go to dinner and a movie.
You can go to dinner and a movie. I often do during the Rosenkavalier.
I'm only there for the trio.
Yeah, and the end of Act 1, but that's it. So, setup number 10, please, Julie. We're not going to play it quite yet. I had mentioned that Don Carlo, that I heard glimmerings of the sound of the famous Zerilli-Marimò, and other parts of Don Carlo. We were talking before we came to the auditorium about our favorite Verdi operas, and I could even add my favorite opera. They vary. Le Troyenne is in there, and Fideleo's in there, and a lot of Verdi and La Clemenza di Tito that you sang in, by the way. I loved it. It's a wonderful opera.
You like it?
Oh, I love La Clemenza. It's my favorite Mozart.
Well, there's one.
All right, Publio is not the role we go to, but I love, love, love that opera. Anyway, Don Carlo has everything. But in a way, it's kind of like the opera you're in now, Le Conte of Man, that there are so many versions. In Don Carlo, it has been in French, it's been in Italian. In Le Conte of Man, because Offenbach died before it was completed, and there was some discussion about the order of the acts. The leading performers play numerous roles, and some people say it's the same guy repeated. Other people say, no, these are distinct characters. But you could spend a lifetime going to Don Carlo and Le Conte of Man and Don Giovanni and be challenged by new things that you discover as if for the first time. Have you sung King Philip yet?
No, this year I'll do.
And is that going to be in Stockholm or Tokyo? Or
We're going to do the French version, Don Carlos, in Paris, and then a year later we'll do it in Italian in Dallas.
Dallas, okay. Good. I hope to get
closer.
to Paris and Dallas. Anyway, it is an amazing opera. We had Ferruccio Furlanetto here years ago. Anytime the Met does Don Carlo, I tend to get performers from that cast to be here on the stage. So you just said you do it in French and then in Italian. What is that like mentally, not to mention musically, but let's start with mentally and then musically.
Verdi said it in French first.
Yeah.
And so it's easier. I'm just lucky to be doing it in that order. Most people don't. The French version is almost never done, so you don't get that. While I enjoy singing in Italian more, there's often extra chances for colors in French music that don't necessarily translate into the Italian. It presents its own set of challenges. There's also 70 pages of extra music in the Don Carlos.
And a ballet.
And a ballet, but I'm not. The fifth act doesn't even affect Philip, but most of my music, I mean, like the first act duet, for example, has 19 pages of new music.
Every one a gem.
Yeah.
Every note. There was an expression, la musica di Verdi è come il maiale, non si spreca niente. In other words, the music of Verdi is like a wonderful pig. Nothing goes to waste. Happy Rosh Hashanah. So let's hear number 10, please. From the Tucker Gallery.
certo regal, avete il poter,
So I was there that night. It was very beautiful, and it was more beautiful now watching it.
Oh, thank you.
Because it was a lot closer to the performer, not here, but there, and saw you differently than I did when I was in the hall of Carnegie Hall. I was noticing tonight how beautiful the lyrics are in Italian. I don't know the French lyrics by heart, but they're very poetic, and here the king has, they just said to him, you rule half the world, you can't manage your own family. And your son is going crazy, and his friend Rodrigo is your only loyal one, and maybe he's not. And your mistress Emily is going wild, and your wife never loved me, and everything is being gathered in that one moment for King Philip. And then in the next act, everything is gathered for Elizabeth in Tutte le Vanità. And the genius of Verdi, that each character got his or her summation aria, in a way, and we learned their inner feelings, because each one of those big arias by all these performers is internal. And that was different from Verdi. Certainly in Macbeth and certain other operas, you had people being internal, but not where each one of them is, and one aria is even more thrilling and emotionally compelling than the next one. Had you sung that in public before? Was this a new?
That was the first time I ever sang it in front of people. Yeah, but that's the goal for my voice type. You want to have done this
Yeah.
at some point. You know, we're all striving for that. And, when they ask you, what do you want to sing, you say that first. And they let me do it. You know, maybe a few years before I was ready, but I still wanted it.
And it was beautiful. It was very beautiful. Sometimes I've heard it where the bass is wonderful and dramatic, but there wasn't the beauty.
But you have to live some years of your life before Philip makes sense.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. May you never go through what he went through. But I do have to ask you now, having looked at these videos from that night,
It's very strange, by the way, to have this going
I
on.
can
Very odd. Everybody look at my YouTube channel suddenly.
You had a different handkerchief.
Yeah,
Did you change them for each aria?
I did. Every time I came out, I had a different
So
one.
tell us that
Yeah.
story.
It's not much of a story. The ladies all have 15 dresses in their closet, and we come out in the penguin costume. I said, well, how can I change it? And so I had. They all came from different people in my life.
I
That
see.
meant them to me.
Okay.
They had a little more meaning to it, but.
But I was thinking maybe they're related to the aria, to the subject matter.
No, I
Okay.
didn't consider that at all.
Okay. So Julian, please play number 12. This is a wonderful piece of video that you will recognize. The Met's famous production, the Sonia Frizzell production of Aida, had a good long run. And they're doing a new production this year on New Year's Eve with Angel Blue, who's here, and other wonderful artists. And you were in the last performance of the old production.
I asked Peter Gelb if I could take a piece of the set home. It was a huge piece of stone, not stone, but it looks like stone.
Yeah.
And he says, "What are you gonna do with that?" I said, "It's going on the wall immediately.
Yeah.
There's all these hieroglyphics. It's incredible." And I think lightning struck him in that moment. He realized he could tear down this thing and sell it for a mint
Yeah.
and
yeah.
make his money back. But I
Did you
said,
get
well,
a
but it was
piece of
my
it?
idea. I need the piece of the thing.
Right.
No, I still haven't got it yet.
Did you get your costume?
No. They made that mistake with Sandra Radvanovsky because she asked for it, thinking it was the last run, and then they did it again, and the costume was already in her home in
But I went, there were 6 of them in May, and I went to all 6. And you had Angela Mead, and then you had Leah Crocetto, all of whom have been here. It's wonderful that everybody we're talking about, you can look up Adventures in Italian Opera on YouTube or Vimeo and find all these artists. But the very last one was Leah Crocetto as Aida. And
a last-minute fill-in.
last minute fill-in. But this particular night was an Angela Mead night. Just watch and we'll talk about it after, okay?
In Barcelona.
And you were 15 and he was 12?
No, 2000.
I'll put this back on. I'm going to put this right here.
Yep. It was quite late, yeah? Quite late.
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. Sì.
Perché salvaggio domenica How'd we do? Okay? A good day?
Yes.
You had enough of me?
Enough.
It was too short.
Come on.
It's before midnight still. Seems like far enough, right?
Yeah, too.
In the meanwhile, where he's taking off everything, can you say like thank you so much? And this
Yeah,
like
of course.
like this is like I don't know, like a resume of 13 hours or something.
Yeah. You ready? And after 13 hours, we have come to our end. I want to thank Ruben for coming and staying with me all day. I'm sick of me, he has to be sick of me. This has been quite a trip, and there's no chance you don't have enough footage. There's no chance. Thank you, everybody who came to the shows today, and good night.
So what was this program that they were making?
I had sung 2 performances that day. So we sang La Boheme for the matinee, and we sang Aida for the evening. And the company had called me because they had contracted me to do both, but then they had to change the schedule, and suddenly these 2 were going to fall on the same day. And so they just asked if they thought I could do it. And I said, of course. Who wouldn't want to sing 2 shows in one day? And so it was the only time I'm ever paid more than the tenor. And and so they had the camera crew follow me all day to kind of make a little social media video about doing 2 roles in one day.
I thought among the things I found interesting there is that you, when you're out in front at the Met, don't necessarily know what's happening right behind the gold curtain. And I noticed, by the way, last night, I love the Met's gold curtain. I wish they would use it more. It's a beautiful frame for the stage. It would save the money. You don't have to make a new curtain every time you do a new production. But the Hoffman, which is a relatively recent production, has the gold curtain.
Oh, yeah.
And it worked beautifully.
I loved
But they were already striking the set. They were already moving the costumes out. The moment the curtain calls start, the performance has ended, and everybody has to start working. And the artists are still getting their curtain calls, the audiences are cheering and so on. But then there's the exhalation, there's the removal of the costumes and the makeup, and that feeling. At the end of a day where you sang Colline in the afternoon, and you've sung 40 at the Met, by the way, I looked it up.
Is that the number?
Yeah, 40. Right now it's 40 Colline. And then in the evening, this big role of Ramphis in Aida, in that huge production. What did it feel like at the end of the day?
Bowing in front of that curtain is a dream come true for any singer, truly.
Yeah.
And so it's not lost on me to take 2 bows there in one day. Most singers never, most singers are not paid to sing. And so to do this here at this level is truly a dream come true.
Yeah.
And so to have a little focus on you that day and get to go through 2 famous productions of Zeffirelli and the Aida, I mean, you know, once in a lifetime. And,
Yeah.
and the Met knew that too, and that's why they had this poor kid follow me all day.
On Saturday, you are going to be starring in a live international transmission of Offenbach's Les Contes d'Hoffman. You play 4 different roles. Is it one character or is it 4 different characters?
For me, if you know Hoffman, I think the villains are Hoffman. I think it's the bad angel on his shoulder the whole time. And so to that end, they can look different, but there has to be a through thought between all of them. And one is more evil, one is more cunning, one is having more fun. But the through point of the one in your ear saying, "You're never going to be good enough." That's my role of the villains in Hoffman. I'm not imposing this torture. It's Hoffman's self-imposing torture.
Now, I don't want to give away too much. As I said, The Tales of Hoffman is Les Contes d'Hoffman is a magnificent opera, but it's very complicated because there's so many versions. In this particular version, Hoffman has his muse, who is also known as Niklaus. The way the staging happened, if you feel we're giving stuff away,
No,
you
no,
can
no.
tell me privately.
These are old shows.
Okay,
Spoiler alert.
that I felt last night that the muse of poetry, who was also Niklaus, the sort of aide to Hoffman, was conspiring with you.
Yeah, a different angle.
It's a very different angle than before, that both of you had your agendas to make Hoffman fail in his attempt to find love, whatever Hoffman was destined to do, which was to become a writer. But he had to live through all kinds of terrible things to have something to write about. And I felt that the way your character was directed and interpreted, that yes, you might have been the bad side of his nature, but you were the one who made him realize his artistry.
Oh, for sure, no doubt.
And that was a very persuasive and interesting and new approach for me for this opera that I've known for 40 plus years. And it'll be in HD all around the world. I will be lecturing before it in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And, but I encourage you better always to see an opera in the opera house.
Yeah, thank you.
Always, 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 always. The sound, that's the main reason. And also because in an opera house, you decide who you look at, whereas the cameraman or camera woman makes the decision with the director
Good
what
point.
you see.
That's a good point.
And I like, when I'm sitting in opera house, last night, because I knew you were going to be here tonight, I was following you particularly, but I was following you in the context of the stage direction of your characters and those around you. So go see it in HD, but then go see it in the opera house because the sound is remarkable. Christian Van Horn, thank you.
Thank you, Freddie. Thank you.
This has been,
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
this seems to be bass baritone month. On October 30th, I have Ryan Speedo Green. And a TBD to be named later on November 14th. And then we'll break until March, and then we have a lot of great guests again in the spring semester. But thank you all, and do go to a live performance of an opera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.